going on, guys? It's the other Sean at Shock Surplus, back in the shop again, and so is my Bronco. If you're late to the Shock Surplus party here, what we like to do is test all the various suspension options available on our own vehicles so we can cut the marketing mumbo jumbo and give you a real world view on how they actually feel and if they're right for you. This Bronco and my own Bronco may only be about a year old now, but it's on suspension setup number 5, and number 5 today is Icon's 2.5 true body coilovers. We went with the IR, so no reservoir or no external reservoir. They have been, I will say, one of my favorite options out of what we've ran so far. But if you want to know how each of those previous options went, from the stock ESCVs to the Bilstein 5100s, IPOC 2.0 coilovers, Icon 2.5 EXP shocks, take a look at the link in the bio and we'll post up all the different videos and articles we've done on what we've had so far. Now, before we go too deep into things, I do think we do need to talk about the big black elephant in the room, which are these 37 by 13.5 inch Maxxis tires. Maybe a little bigger than what you guys are running, or maybe what you guys are planning to run in the future. Nonetheless, do make a pretty big difference on your overall suspension package for sure. Just an example here is, these are 35 pounds per corner, heavier than the stock Sasquatch 315 by 7017 Goodyear Territory tires, which is a ton of unsprung mass. We're talking about 40% increase or something like that. On smaller diameter shocks, you definitely feel some dribbling where they can't really control that tire. But if you have enough dampening force like these 2.5 inch body Icons do, or any 2.5 inch body shock would, it actually does help a lot. It does make a lot of the bigger bumps a little smaller because they can roll over bigger stuff, but a lot of what we talk about here will still be applicable if you have 33s, 35s, or another smaller tire size. Icon pulls out the longest extended length and the shortest compressed length we've seen so far of any of the coilovers out there. This means they are pumping the most travel possible. Set up as standard, I believe it's 11 in the front and 14 in the back. Obviously, that extra short compressed length is going to be an issue with keeping those 37s out of your fenders and your flares. To give you a really solid solution, Icon offers bump stop spacers to slide in over your standard bumps. So if you don't have a big tire that you don't have to protect the body from, you get all the travel that they're designed for. Or if you do, they have a simple, inexpensive solution to just slot in there and keep your fenders from looking like mine. Obviously, I haven't done that, and it hasn't been too bad. Now, talking about lengths, the overall extended length, and particularly the rear, is really the only place where these coilovers actually differed from anything else we've had to install. So without a doubt, the rear shocks on these Broncos from Icon are definitely the longest. To make that work, they essentially have to run the coilover through the tower. So instead of mounting from underneath like the stock or everybody else's coilovers, they mount from an upper plate that gets sandwiched. And then that shock ends up being so long to even be able to get it in. It took 2 of us jumping up and down on the axle to flex the lower trailing arm enough to just slide that bolt through. Obviously, that is telling us to get all the performance, and namely the travel out of these rear shocks, you're gonna need to upgrade at least your lower links or trailing arms, although uppers are probably a good idea as well. Now, talking about what you guys all came here for, how do they really ride? As a caveat, Icon does set their shocks and coilovers up to handle at least a little bit of additional weight, and this Bronco is probably on the lighter of the packages. It's a 2.3, it's a 2-door, it has a manual transmission. So overall, not only is it stock weight, but it's on the light side of the stock weight, which means for me, they may be a little firmer than they may be for most other people. Now, starting off with on-road performance, or how it's gonna feel on your commute, these are pretty darn good. They're definitely a little bit firmer than maybe some people might like, but they're certainly still better than the stock ESCV Bilsteins, and in turn, probably much more livable than the stock black Hitachis. Direction changes, they're really tight. You may feel a little bit of the surface of the road a little bit, but over bigger bumps and stuff like that, they take it great, and you can really rely on it. They mitigated pretty much any of the body roll and brake dive I had for the previous parts, and generally handled really well. Now, obviously in the dirt, as with most any other 2.5 inch body coilover, they are really solid. They do certainly feel very digressive, so for smaller bumps at lower speeds, you certainly might feel them a little bit, and for individual wheel movement at speeds, let's say under 10 miles an hour, they will jostle you a little bit, but as you start to pick the speeds up and hit bigger bumps, it is very surprising what they can take. A lot of that comes down to the big piston and dampening force of a 2.5-inch body shock. They also do a stellar job with their bump stops. The way they're tuned is really solid. Their ability to take a bump while under corner, under load, reset, recover, and keep going is amazing. There was many times where I found myself sideways, coming over a bump, and it would take the bump, settle, and be right back on my way with a very small steering correction, which is really something to admire. Now, I keep coming back to how stable and sharp and how well they handle, and that's just because they really, really blew me away, especially after running something as loose as the iBox. You could basically slam on the brakes, and unlike pretty much any other shock we ran, the rear brakes were actually working. It wasn't ABS cutting the rear tires because they were unloading so much. Around turns, you could be very confident in the amount it was going to sway, and any weight transition was very predictable. It did lean a little bit more towards understeer, a little bit more push than maybe I think is right for me, but I think for the average person, it is a setup that you could drive fast and won't necessarily bite you at all. Like I said, they will take a hit that sends you in the air, they will land, they will recover and keep going, and there's not a lot of shocks out there that can do that. Well, in leading up to this, you guys may have seen the small catastrophe of Shockgate 2022 when one of our Icon 2.5 EXPs did explode. We found after some investigation that it was an issue with IFP depth, which is kind of a small and easy mistake to make, and more of an isolated incident that we don't really fault Icon for. In fact, for the short time they lasted, those Icons were boogieing. So when we got the chance to run their true body 2.5-inch coilovers rather than the EXPs, we knew we wanted to jump and give them the second chance they deserve. Who are these for? I will say they, as with most other Icon stuff, they are a little bit firm, which may not be for everybody, but if these are in your budget, you want some tight handling, or you're carrying some additional weight, these are a killer choice. So what's next for this Bronco? Well, what's next is already here. We've already been out to Johnson Valley with another Bronco, testing both the Fox 2.5 DSCs, which is on this boy, and King's 2.5-inch adjustable shocks on another Bronco, back-to-back testing. So that's definitely something you guys are gonna wanna see. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit that bell icon so you'll be the first to see what comes next on our Bronco journey. In the meantime, if you're interested in these Icons, those Foxes, or anything else for your Bronco or whatever else you got, give us a call. I know we got the answer for you.